So I want to start today with some stories from the newspapers, set a tone. This was over the last few years. Tehran. One afternoon, Fatima Eskandari opened the front metal gate of the shelter she runs for runaway girls in central Tehran and was confronted with two men armed with knives and rifles. "Who are you?" she asked. "We are the uncles of a girl named Ranach. We are told that you are keeping Ranach." And indeed, that's true. Ranach was 16 years old, and she was inside, recovering from the bruises that she suffered at the hands of these same uncles. She had run away from home to escape them. The uncles had driven from Sanandaj in the northwest corner of Iran, hundreds of miles away. They demanded to see their niece. The uncles said she had shamed the family by leaving home a few days before. They had come to behead her. They're very open about this. There's no secret. Staten Island, New York. A 17-year-old girl worked as a cashier in a convenience store. The store owner said that the girl was stealing from the register and he was going to fire her. The girl went to her father and said that the store owner had groped her. The father flew into a rage, grabbed a baseball bat and a gun, went down to the store and killed two people. Islamabad, Pakistan. Zahida Perveen, 21 years old, was pregnant in 1998 when her husband, Mahmoud Iqbal, bound her hands and feet with a rope. First, he shoved a rod in one of her eyes, blinding her, then cut off her nose and ears. He suspected her of seeing another man. Tuscaloosa, Alabama. Felicia Scott already had two sons, but she had an obsessive desire to have another baby. She convinced her boyfriend to help her get one. So they went out, shot a pregnant woman, and cut the full-term fetus. Saudi Arabia, New York Times. A young woman was raped by 7 men. She pressed charges. The Saudi court sentenced her to 200 lashes. 200 lashes is almost a lethal dose. Dominican Republic. Cressida Mendina is 18. She's been married for a year in which her husband, Jose, beat her constantly. She had the courage to separate from him, but she met with Jose after their separation when he asked her to talk. He took her to a desolate street on his motorcycle, and they had an argument. He grabbed a container he had filled with what they called the devil's acid, a mixture of gasoline, hydrochloric acid, car battery acid, urine, and other chemicals. He threw it at Cressida. The liquid disfigured her permanently. It burned her face, her arms, the right side of her chest, and a portion of her legs. She's still trying to bring her ex-husband to justice. Gosaragan, Bangladesh. I'm almost done with this. The village elders met under a lychee tree to put a value on Payara Begum's grotesquely ruined face. A young man had become obsessed with her, but she was married and he was turned away. He took his revenge with sulfuric acid to erase the beauty that had once enchanted him and to empty her life of happiness. Her cheeks melted, her right eye was blinded and hollowed to a crater. The husband had to bribe the prosecutors before they would even take up the case. Eventually, the perpetrator's family had to pay a fee of $3,000. In 1 year, the year I have statistics for, 1999, there were 174 acid attacks in Bangladesh. And those are the ones that were officially reported. Of course, probably the vast majority of these never get reported. The article mentioned a 13-year-old girl who was attacked as she slept. Some victims die, some are forced to marry their attacker. Another was forbidden to come home until she allowed her husband to take a second wife. Well, these stories are obviously at the extreme of human behavior. But the purpose of giving you all that is to explain that human sexual behavior has extremely deep roots, very emotional, and very hard to change or manipulate. Male-female relationships are very difficult for humans to cope with. And I think it shouldn't particularly surprise you that human sexuality is not particularly driven by rational calculation. The few stories that I pulled out of the newspapers are just the tip, clearly just the tip of an iceberg of a very widespread phenomenon. In the long course of human history, across cultures, you see gave you everything from Brooklyn to Bangladesh. These very similar sorts of things happen. Females, through the long course of history and in most cultures where most humans have lived, females are treated very badly. There's a huge amount of battering. Battering is the prime human version of violence. And females are so discriminated against that statistics indicate that there's something now, right now, something like 100 million missing females. That these females are either aborted before they're born, killed by infanticide pretty much as soon as they're born, or neglected so that they don't get the food or they don't get the medical care that their brothers get. So there's a dearth of something like 100 million women in the world today. And so these are extreme incidents, but it's an extremely common thing. And one of the purposes of this course is to try to get you to understand what is causing all of this. From a biological point of view, this abuse of females is extremely weird. Males, as you know, can only reproduce via a female. And evolution is, the name of the game is reproducing. So almost all species, what kind of a female do the males want? They want the healthiest, most well-protected, the best-fed female. And you'll see some examples of the extremes to which males will go to provide this, so that that female can produce offspring for that male and carry on the evolution game. But in humans, we find that it's very general that females are treated atrociously. And it just doesn't make sense that human males should keep many of their females hungry, sick, and abused. And in childbirth, if a woman does give birth to a child, they can often be underweight, sickly, and so forth, because the mother is not in great health. So this is all a biological disaster, the way human males treat human females. And we don't know why. I mean, we do. We have some idea why humans do that. And the first part of the course will talk something about that. That's on the individual level, and evolution works on an individual level. But if you think on a species level, missing 100 million of your breeders, that does not sound like a great tactic for survival of the species. So I spent some time when I started getting interested in this whole topic reading the anthropological literature, the sociological literature, the feminist literature, and basically I thought all those explanations were a crock. And I don't think they came close to an answer. So in my own studies, I had to go back to the very beginning and understand what sex was really all about. So I'm going to tell you a few important things about sex and reproduction. The first one is that reproduction turns out to be very difficult. So one day, I was sitting over in our botanical garden under one beautiful big huge oak tree that they have, and the ground was kind of just covered with acorns under this tree. And I asked one of the forestry people, because that's the kind of things that they know, I asked them, how many acorns does this tree produce? And they said, well, the spread is so much, and it's this high, and and it's so deep. And they came up with probably 750,000 acorns a year. I thought, wow. So I checked the literature and found that people that collect these nuts for commercial purposes, a good oak tree can produce 500 pounds of acorns a year. And many sources say that an oak tree produces millions of acorns in its lifetime. Wow, a lot of reproduction, right? Got to be sex before. Then I asked myself, how many of these million acorns survive to make a tree like their parents? What's the answer? I think basic biology course, you might know that. Well, what if each tree, on average, taking an average of trees, made 2 acorns? How many acorns would there be? How many oak trees would there be in the next? Made 2 acorns that made trees. How many oak trees would there be in the next generation?